The government's always looking for ways to come after your assets and make a quick buck. Today, we're going to talk about 4 ways that the government is opportunistic in trying to come after your assets. Okay, so the first one that we're going to talk about is tax that comes on retirement accounts. This is one that we beat the drum on all the time. There's this misnomer out there that putting money in retirement accounts is just, without question, always a good thing. And the reality is it may or may not be, depending on age, circumstances, tax rates, income. All of these different elements play a significant part in whether using an IRA is actually an advantage. At the end of the day, I am going to have to pay taxes on it. There's no getting around it. In things like real estate and life insurance, there's assets that I can avoid paying taxes on entirely. IRAs, sadly, are not one of those things. So what people oftentimes think is, because there's an idea that I'll have less money in retirement, that I'm just naturally going to pay less tax. A couple of factors that are in play here. One, if you're a good saver, there's a good chance that your income tax burden will be just as high as it was during your working years. Think of it this way. When I get into my later years, I no longer have kids at the house. I no longer have a house payment. And so suddenly these things that were creating significant tax benefits when I was younger are no longer there. So even if my income is lower, I still might find myself in just as high of or higher tax bracket. All things being equal, if I was in the same tax bracket that I am when I retire, it would be the exact same whether I did a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA. It would make no difference. We are going to have to pay taxes on our IRAs, whether it's in our lifetime or if we pass it on to the next generation and do a stretch IRA. Our heirs are going to have to pay that tax. There's just no way we can get around it. So when you're putting money in IRAs, make sure that you're accounting for and thinking about the fact that I will have to be paying taxes on those. And because tax rates are lower today than they have been historically, there's a very real chance that I'm going to be paying a lot more in taxes than I would if I would have done something entirely different.
Sadly, we work with a lot of people who have put a lot of money into these accounts. And one example comes to mind where this couple was at retirement and they'd done a great job of saving, no question about that. And they were actually going to be in a situation where every dollar they took into their lives, everything was going to be taxable because they were in IRAs, pension, obviously Social Security also gets taxed. Did anybody know that would be taxed? So the problem is that you feel like you've done a great job, but now you're going to have to share that with the government for the rest of your life. And then even like you said, if you pass that on to your heirs, they're going to have to pay it. You just can't avoid it.
So what you're saying is that putting money in IRAs and 401ks, while it does have a place in situations, it can make sense. More often than not, you're just creating a long-term relationship with the IRS that's likely going to cost you more than what you save. The second thing on our list of ways that the government can come after our assets is through estate taxes. Talk a little bit about estate taxes, what they are, what are the thresholds that we're dealing with today, where things are headed, and why we need to be thinking about it.
Absolutely. So basically the idea here is the government says if your estate is large enough, bigger than whatever threshold they decide on, then you're going to have to pay a lot of tax on that. And when I say a lot, basically anything above what they've created as this kind of lifetime exclusion, you have to pay 40% towards this estate tax to the federal government, and at the state level you might actually pay more additional above that. The level for a couple is about 26 million, and you might say, oh man, that sounds like a pretty big number. I may not have to do this. Well, sorry to say, in 2 years that's going to be cut in half. So already we know that that's going to happen. And then we also know that Congress gets to do whatever they want, right? They can change that number to be something different. It wasn't that long ago that it was basically 2 million for a couple. So it's a moving target, number one. Number two, there are actually things that you can do about this. And basically 2 directions you can go. Either one, you can move assets outside of your estate, or secondly, you can use life insurance to basically, if you're just accepting, hey, we're going to be above that level, but I want to pass as much as I can to the next generation. I want to have life insurance in place. The kids use that to pay the tax. So all of my assets actually do get passed on.
One of the big differences between families, businesses that are able to kind of create that generational wealth that we're looking for is the ability to navigate this estate tax. Because again, you think about it, if I'm someone who doesn't think about it, I can be outrageously successful. I can build, a $500 million net worth, and that suddenly gets cut in half when I die, right? So the key is, again, to make sure that you're thinking about and making the proper you're doing the proper planning on the front end so that estate taxes don't have to eat all of our wealth away. Number 3, we're going to talk about probate. Okay, people hear that word, Rod, and most people have no idea what it means. They know it sounds bad, right? Probate. It's kind of scary, but my experience is people just don't have any clue what it is. Talk a little bit, give us an idea of what probate is, so that we make sure that we're not subject or we're not victims of the government taking our money.
Yeah, absolutely. So what most people will do is they'll set up a will that tells where their assets are going to go when they die, right? And I'm not saying that isn't going to happen. What I am saying is it can't happen on its own. In other words, if you have a bank account or you have real estate or other things like that, and you've said, I want this to go to my kids or to a charity or to whomever else, the courts actually have to get involved to make that happen. So in other words, you die, the will is taken to a judge. The judge looks at it and first of all says, do I feel like this is all legit? Are there anyone who wants to challenge the will? And then once they've said, okay, yeah, I'm good with all of this, then they basically create the order to allow the bank account change to happen, the ownership to the beneficiary, the real estate, all the different pieces. That's probate. Okay, so here's the problem. Number one, there are costs associated with that, right? Especially if it gets challenged, all of a sudden
Legal
now,
fees and
absolutely,
all that
you're
stuff.
hiring an attorney, they're hiring an attorney. You pay the court, of course, to do this either way, and it takes a lot of time. So you've inherited an asset. Let's say it's a piece of real estate or a business or something, and you can't do anything with it yet because it's not actually in your name. Well, if you're incurring costs or you have other decisions you're trying to make, you're trying to sell it. But now this probate, it's not unusual for it to take 6 months, in some states even a year. And so it creates huge problems financially and also just time-wise.
Yeah, if you think about it, if you don't have the proper liquidity and your money gets tied up in probate, it could create financial losses in other areas. So like the government getting their hand in the cookie jar, suddenly playing a factor, it can cause long-term problems as well. So make sure, again, doing the proper planning, using trusts, things like that, you can completely avoid probate. It's actually very easy.
Basically, so what happens with the trust is that the asset exists inside of the trust so that when you pass away and you've already designated beneficiaries in the trust, it's a legal document that takes the place of probate. You don't even have to go to the judge. You just basically go to the bank. You go to the county recorder, and all of a sudden the real estate gets to exchange hands immediately based on the way that the trust was written out.
Okay, and finally, Rod, talk about tax liens and judgments, another way the government tries to get at our assets.
Yeah, so no surprise, if you owe tax, they want the tax. And if
Shocker.
you don't pay it, they're going to come after you. And what's interesting on this one is people don't realize that they can actually come after bank accounts. They can come after your payroll. They can contact your employer and say, hey, send us the money first before you pay the employee. So quite literally, they're taking your assets in that situation.
It doesn't matter. You don't have privacy in your bank account. They will reach into the bank account and take the money if it's there. Just bottom line.
Yep, absolutely.
So, make sure you're cognizant of that. Now, there's things that you can do. Again, we're not going to get into details, but if you own your assets and hold them in proper places that are asset protected, you can avoid some of this. Now, maybe one way to avoid it is just to pay your taxes. Now, don't pay more than what you should pay, but pay the amount that you should pay. Okay, Rod, what's a judgment?
Yeah, judgments is basically where the government is the enforcer. Someone sues you or some other issue came up and you owe, that they're going to come and force you to pay that. Well, guess what? Again, they can come after assets in order to make that happen. One of the things that I suggest on this one, that you have insurance in place, right? You have liability insurance with your property insurance and car insurance and this kind of thing. Well, include with that what's called an umbrella policy. What that means is that on my home insurance, I may have certain limitations, right? So someone has a trip and fall on the sidewalk in front of my house, and they're coming after me for that because whatever, it was icy, and now that's on me. Well, guess what? I have insurance for that, but it has limitations. If my maximum is whatever 500,000, and they're coming after me for 750, a million, whatever, the insurance company is going to pay up to what they're on the hook for, but then it's up to me to make up the difference unless I have an umbrella policy. Basically what that does is it adds an additional million, 2 million, 3 million, however much you want to have, basically puts the insurance company on my side so that their attorneys are coming and fighting that fight for me instead of me having to try to do it on my own. And so it makes a huge difference on that kind of judgment side.
It's a really easy thing that we can do that will make a huge difference. So here's the deal, Rod. At the end of the day, everybody wants to build and protect their wealth. Click on the screen to learn more ways to do exactly that.